Hey, good morning. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Sunday School. Weather's starting to turn in September. Hopefully, it's beautiful out. Hope you guys are enjoying it. This morning, we're going to be in Malachi 3, 6 through 12. So go ahead and pause me and read it and then come back. Deal. Cool. A little bit of background on this section. It's pretty well quoted in terms of the Old Testament and pastors talking about tithing and giving to the local church. But there's three interesting facts that I want to touch on before y'all jump into discussing it with your parents or your friends. So number one, so last week we talked about the overall context of the topic in Malachi being kind of social justice and taking care of others. And in chapter 3, where we're at, he starts to lay out like the community's response to issues of people being oppressed. And some people are basically looking the other way, and some other people are crying out to God, but not doing anything besides that, right? They're just doing nothing but hanging out by themselves and asking God to fix it instead of actively participating in what God is doing. And then we look at verse 5, which is right before this section. Obviously, 5 comes before 6. I think that we know that. I would hope. I'm working on it with my almost 5-year-old. It's pretty fun. You know how it is. But verse 5 talks about God's judgment on people who don't pay a fair wage but don't take care of poor people or take care of immigrants. So that's an interesting context to look at verses 6 through 12 with. The second one, in most cases, tithes meant like crops and animals. Even in this passage, we have numerous ideas that tithe was about food, right? So religious leaders who accused Jesus of tithing legalistically, they were giving like herbs and spices, which I don't know if you know anything about growing crops. I know very little, but with that little knowledge, I know that herbs and spices are pretty easy to grow. Even I can grow some basil or some thyme, and I am killing a bunch of tomatoes in my backyard right now, which is great. But anyway, the blessing that God promises in response to the people tithing follows like the same thread as the crops and the vines that were divinely protected. He says, let's see, all the nations will call you blessed, for yours will be a delightful land. Third point, so the temple was a place of government for the Jewish people. So like the separation of churches to state was not there. But it also raises an interesting question for us today concerning our relationship with tithing to the government, which we call taxes. But our taxes cover things like Medicare and welfare. And beyond that, in the New Testament mindset, God's presence is no longer reserved for a building, right? So Christ's death emphasized that God is everywhere. God's church has nothing to do with a building or a 501c3 or whatever organization that we're given to. God's church is everywhere based on Christ dying for us and being resurrected for us. So God's church is people, period, which reinforces Malachi's concern that the tithe is being neglected as it's causing people to go hungry and it's failing to care for the poor in the community. So with those three things in mind, let's go through these questions that we got below. Jump into Malachi with your parents or your friends or your siblings or whoever you got. Have a good Sunday.